Yo, what's up everybody? This is Jose. Welcome back to our channel. In today's video, most people that are getting deported, we have these mass deportations that we're expecting, are not illegals. That's right. Most people who are deportable are not exactly here illegally. As you guys know, most likely the most deportable people that will be most likely to get deported are not the people that are here illegally. We're going to talk about people who are deportable, who are not here illegally. As you guys know, there are programs for people who come from Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, a few other countries that are allowed to come into the United States. Now, they're not here illegally. There's a lot of ignorance in the United States right now, and they label everybody migrants or illegal, but a lot of those people are not exactly illegal. Those people actually went through a legal avenue. They came through Mexico and they turned themselves in voluntarily at U.S. Customs. So that does not denote being illegal. Being illegal means you bypass Border Patrol and enter the country secretly. And that's the real definition of being in the United States illegally. But somebody who turned themselves into Border Patrol at the border, they are detained. A lot of them are returned. They don't qualify for an exile status or refugee status. There's just individuals that don't really have any business there. But then you have the individuals that receive legal status. But when I say legal status, there's U.S. citizen, there's refugees that can become permanent residents. So you have the U.S. citizen, the permanent resident, you have these temporary statuses, and then way at the bottom you have somebody who enters illegally. The problem with a lot of people in the United States is that they believe that illegality is all this, but illegality is only this over here. People with temporary status are not here illegally. They're given a driver's license, they're giving a work permit. Most people coming now that turn themselves into customs are receiving a work permit or receiving a driver's license. So that doesn't denote illegality. So what's interesting right now in the United States is that most people are so ignorant or malinformed that they believe only U.S. citizens are illegal. They believe residents are illegal. They believe people with temporary statuses are illegal. And really, illegal denotes crossing into the United States undetected or by some other fraudulent means. Now, when we have these mass deportations, the vast majority of people who are deportable are going to be people with temporary statuses. Now, these people have a court date that's coming up, so that might be the opportunity to deport them. These individuals are kind of like in a probation. They call it a parole, but a lot of them even get an ankle monitor for a time period, so they know where they're at. So it's not like these are not untrackable people that are here. We don't know where they're doing. That's not the case. No, the people with temporary statuses have to register their address, their family members. I mean, there's a lot that is known about these people to where they're trackable. So if a deportation were to take place, it can happen. Now, I think it's a little suspicious that these individuals, millions of these people, were given a temporary status, but they were left in a limbo. Why do I think that's suspicious? I think it's suspicious that you would let all these people into the United States, give them a temporary status, but never really move them along the lines. Now, some of these individuals that got the temporary status eventually became residents and are now citizens. It's just a small, minute percentage. Excuse me. It's a small percentage. I've met people now who were temporary status and now they're residents, and when they're here 5 years, they can become U.S. citizens. So those individuals are not illegal. They're going through a legal process. But I do think it's suspicious that why would the federal government allow millions of people to enter the United States to leave them in a limbo status? The only thing that makes sense is that they planned mass deportations, and part of that is allowing people to come here. Now, allowing people to come here to deport them is actually a business model. As you guys know, traded publicly are companies whose job it is to deport people. But here's the thing. That little bucket of people down here who are here illegally are very hard to deport. They're hard to track down. They're not going to make it easy to be found. And those are the ones who are actually here illegally are most likely to remain here illegally and not be disturbed. But again, the federal government allows for millions of people to enter the United States with almost no intention of moving them into permanent resident status. Why? I just talked to somebody who is Cuban, and they're telling me that they've been here 6 years, and they've been left in a 6-year limbo in the temporary status. So why would you leave people in a 6-year temporary status? Doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, these are the most deportable people. Thus, if mass deportations came, they would be the first to go. And they're trackable, they know where they are. It isn't hard to track these people down. I mean, if you wanted to deport 3 million people, you could. You want to deport 1 million people, you could. There's just people that are sitting there that don't really have a resident status. Now, permanent resident status is, as it sounds, permanent resident. You're here, you're not going anywhere. I was myself a permanent resident for most of my life, and then I became a U.S. citizen. The reason I didn't want to become a U.S. citizen is because, honestly, it didn't matter to me. It didn't really, being a U.S. citizen to me, it never mattered. I didn't want to do it. You have to, I'm going to stay off some of the requirements to be a U.S. citizen, but there were some things about being a U.S. citizen that I was just like, not interested in it. You have to swear allegiances and stuff like that, and I didn't care to do any of that. I actually had to do what is kind of like an exemption to where, okay, you're going to become a U.S. citizen, but you don't have to do some of these requirements to become a U.S. citizen, because I didn't want to just go in there and yes, everything, and then lie about those things. It's a sworn oath, and there were some parts of the sworn oath that I was like, okay, this is not something I'm interested in. And me becoming a U.S. citizen was actually quite a nightmare. Not because I could have just got in there and done it, but because there's some personal moral convictions and things that come along with being a U.S. citizen that I didn't care for. But when I was a permanent resident, you could just renew it every 10 years. And I didn't care to stay in the United States. It would have been my first preference, but it wasn't like I had to be here. In fact, if I couldn't renew my residence, me and Katie at one point even looked into real estate in other countries. We said, okay, if we can't live here, we'll live somewhere else. So it wasn't that important to me. But it became important to me when everybody in my family became a U.S. citizen, and then the people that I was related to all became U.S. citizens. And then also the issue of deportations became more of an issue, to where I was a permanent resident, and the climate started to change in the United States, where it became more of a hate. And then I realized, okay, I'm going to have to become a U.S. citizen. I'm not going to keep renewing my residence, because if I keep renewing my residence, one day things could change. And that's almost where we are now. So I became a U.S. citizen, but if that hadn't worked out, I would have looked into another country. It wasn't really like the end of the world for me at that point. It would be now, because I'm already a U.S. citizen, all my family's here, so now it's different. But at that point, it was like, okay, renew the residence. And it's not really a cheap process. You have to pay a lot of money every time you do it. And it became a hassle. It just became easier to become a U.S. citizen. If you are a U.S. resident and you have become a citizen, I don't know what you're waiting for. There's not really too many options at this point. Eventually, I don't know if eventually with all this, the citizen status is going to be closed, where they're not going to allow people who are permanent residents to become U.S. citizens. And if that were to happen, it could close the opportunity to become a U.S. citizen for those people. I'm not really sure how that would work. But where we are right now is the following situation. You do have millions of people that are under temporary status. And again, why the federal government has allowed so many people to be in that temporary status is interesting. It's almost like it's almost like they purposely planned to deport a lot of people. But what's interesting about this, if you're living in the United States and you're against illegal immigration, because most people in the United States right now are just, they hate migrants, and they've been fed all this political rhetoric to where they don't even understand they don't understand any of this stuff we're talking about. The only thing they understand is, I'm an American, you're illegal. They don't really understand all this background stuff. They've been, even though we live in an era of technology and information available, and anything you want to know, you can learn it, people just don't have the education for some reason. Some because they choose not to, some because educating themselves on how things work goes against their ideology, so they prefer not to know how things actually work, so they can be ignorant by choice. But regardless, if you deported all these people that are in temporary status in the United States, which is probably what's going to happen, none of them are illegal. You're not deporting illegals. You're deporting people who tried to come to the United States the right way. People who tried to come to the United States the right way, were entered into the United States, given a driver's license, given benefits of some sort to a small degree. It's not as bad as people say it is, but they're given some benefits. It doesn't make a lot of sense to grab somebody, give them a license, give them some benefits, give them a work permit, have them start paying taxes, unless there's some other thing in the background related to the GDP, incomes, or there's some type of corporation that's going to make money by deporting these people. There has to be some type of interest in the background. Now, I don't know what it is. If you know what it is, talk in the comments. But just from a logical assumption, there has to be some type of special interest in some of this, because it doesn't really make sense to let millions of people into the country only to deport them after they've tried going through the legal process. You tell me if that makes any sense, because it really doesn't. And this is all on a federal level, and that goes beyond politics of party lines. It doesn't go across party lines. It's got to be something else. It doesn't make sense, because the federal government, again, has allowed all these millions of people that are now probably going to get deported. But what's interesting is the people that are actually here illegally, very difficult to deport them. So right now, a lot of the immigration revolves around Latin Americans, Cubans, Venezuelans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, stuff like that. But what's interesting is that right now, most people who are here illegally don't really fall under that category. Yeah. So I can't speak about other parts of the country, but just what I'm seeing here in Florida, where I live, and the areas that I travel to, like here in Sarasota, we have Ukrainians, we have Russians, we have Polish. There's a huge number of European people who are living in the United States. Are they here illegally? Question mark. You also have Brazilians there too. So now you have these people that are Anglo-Saxons, so they're white Europeans. They're not exactly a citizen. They're not a resident. They're not even temporary status. They're overstaying a student visa. They're traveling for work. They reside in the United States for a little bit. They reside in another, these people now, you have a lot of conflicts around Russia. So Russians, Ukrainians, people from over there, Belarus, all those countries up there, even a lot of Eastern Europeans now, Yugoslavians, Bosnians, Moldovians, like just, I don't even know how the list goes on and on and on. Kosovo, there's just a bunch of like all these places there in Eastern Europe. And a lot of those people are affluent. They have money. They'll spend some time in Canada, some time in the United States, some time in Europe, and they're traveling people. With globalization and travel, a lot of these individuals are going to stay in the United States for a little bit. They'll stay in Canada for a little bit. They'll stay in Mexico for a little bit. They'll stay in all these different countries temporarily. So they're technically living in the United States, but they're not actually living in the United States. When you talk about illegally living in the United States, a lot of people don't even understand how people actually get here. They think it's somebody from Mexico who jumps the border. Let me give you guys some examples of how people get here illegally and how they live here illegally, so you understand exactly why I say that most people who are going to get deported are not exactly illegals. They're people who are permanent residences. They might get caught with a DUI. You're a permanent resident, right? You're not a citizen yet. You've been in the United States 15 years, but you get caught in a DUI, you get caught with a suspended license. Deported, So not everybody getting deported is illegal. Most people who are about to get deported won't be illegals. Who is illegal? So there's different ways, different countries, different endless possibilities. But let me give you some possibilities. You have somebody who's from Mexico. They live in Florida, but they have a cousin that lives in Texas. Okay? But they look alike. Their physical features are similar. Their height, their weight. You got a cousin back in Mexico, and your cousin looks kind of like you. Similar. Enough to pass it off. You have double identities. So it's somebody who's living in the United States, and they may have a double identity. So they have two people living in the United States using one identity. They're very careful about, where they live. I don't know the specifics about how they make it all happen, but double identity is a thing where you're here as a U.S. citizen and you give your identity to somebody who makes copies, identical copies of your identity, and there's somebody else living a double life and you're both the same person. They have to be careful not to get arrested, not to get fingerprinted. So these are people that are illegally, but the person has to play a good role. They have to kind of know what, they be schooled correctly. So you have another type of illegal. It's somebody who is a U.S. citizen. Yeah. So U.S. citizens who, when they initially applied, they pretended to be somebody they weren't. So what happens with a lot of people is like Mexican, there was a time where like Haitians could come to the United States, Cubans could come to the United States. Like there's a few nationalities that had exemptions and they can come here. And you had people from other countries that looked similar and they were able to learn. And you have people who are U.S. citizens that the way they became citizens was illegal because they said they were somebody they weren't. They said they were Cubans. So right now, those people aren't going to live in Miami, of course. They're going to live in some other state way out in the middle of nowhere. So a lot of the people who say they're Cubans, or a lot of now you have Africans who pretend to be Haitians. So you have a lot of, again, people who pretend to be somebody they're not to gain legal status. And those individuals are U.S. citizens. But if they were discovered that they lied to become U.S. citizens, could it all be revoked? People say, okay, you're actually Bolivian, you're actually Peruvian, but you're not really Cuban. But you're over here pretending like you came from Cuba when you weren't a Cuban. So this is somebody who, for example, stayed in the United States for a long time, mixed with Cubans or Haitians or another nationality, learn how to talk like them, learn their culture, learn a little bit about a hometown. They might have even spent time in another country. Like you had people who would go to Cuba to pretend to learn how to be Cubans. You had people who would learn all that. By the time they become U.S. citizens, resident citizens, blah, blah, blah. Most likely those people aren't going to live in Miami because they're constantly around Cubans, which would be suspicious as crap because I don't care, Peruvian or Bolivian or Guyanese or whatever the crap you are. I'm Cuban. I know when I see a Cuban, and like as a Cuban, I've met people who say they're Cubans, and I'm like, this person's not really Cuban. But those people aren't going to be like in Miami and Florida. They're going to be like way out in the middle of nowhere, pretending like they're something they're not, because the people around them they're not really familiar with different ethnicities, so they're more undetectable. So now you have this onslaught. I mean, if we're really gonna, like here I can't talk about other places, but here in the Sarasota area where I live, when I look at people who are suspicious of being illegal, I'm not seeing Hispanics. I'm seeing mostly like Russians, Ukrainians, all those Eastern European people who, they look white, they're affluent. So these are individuals who, if they get pulled over by a police officer right now, they might be on vacation. They might just be here on vacation. They might be here on business. They might have a student visa. They may be within the realm of, they're not here illegally, but really their real purpose isn't to be here for the purpose that they portray to be here for. They're actually trying to live here. But, again, they're actually living here in the United States, but they're under the cover of something else. A lot of them are, you have to understand now, like, okay, like when people coming from Latin America versus somebody coming from Europe. Somebody coming from Europe can come in from different countries. They have businesses, they have more money, they can have more, because of globalization, they can have a business here, they can have real estate here, and they don't live here. So it opens up just kind of a can of worms of possibilities. Like you could have somebody staying here and they're legal, right, from Russia, and they own a property, they're only supposed to be here part of the year or something like that, but then they might have 3 other people living in that house who aren't supposed to be there. Elderly people, they might use like an Uber to transport their parents from here to there, their family members, or they might always travel as a family group with the person driving. Like they find ways of legality, but there's just this huge amount of people that are white, affluent, and illegal, or within the realm of illegality, that most likely are not gonna, when that radar comes through, it's gonna be the people who apply for the temporary status, residences who if you're a resident right now and you get locked up, if you're a US resident right now, you need to become a citizen like ASAP. Like, I don't know why you haven't done it. With the climate of the United States recently, you should have become a US citizen. I don't know what you're waiting for. If you're a resident and you're within that 5-year period, I believe, where you can become a citizen, you need to do it. I don't know why. You could be driving down the road tomorrow. Your car insurance gets canceled. You didn't even realize your car insurance was canceled. You get pulled over. You don't have car insurance. You get arrested, deported. But then the problem with actual illegals, people are not actually coming to the United States illegally to work the way Americans think they are. I think Americans don't really understand the process, who the illegals actually are, but just understanding that process of who's here illegally right now. It is like nobody's actually coming here illegally. Like somebody from Mexico, for example, isn't just hiding across the border, come over here to be here illegally. That just isn't happening anymore. There's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to dive into all those reasons, but it just isn't happening. As we know, human trafficking is kind of like a network, and that network doesn't extend into the United States. It kind of stops at border zones. It isn't what it used to be. And with that, there are people that enter the United States illegally, but it's just, think about why would you enter the United States illegally right now? If you could just turn yourself into customs, and chances are they're going to evaluate when you could become a U.S. resident eventually. If I kind of do understand, if you look at it from that perspective, you can kind of understand what the federal government's doing. in a degree, because here's all these people coming in illegally, unchecked, whatever. You can't track these people. Who knows where they are? Who knows if they are? If they commit a crime, they're not in any database. So who knows who these people are? They're ghosts, right? So you have these ghost people. Well, it kind of makes sense with the federal government if you look at it from that perspective. And that, okay, if you can come over here, turn yourself in. If you get deported, well, you got deported. Now it's not worth trying again. But if you have the possibility that if you turn yourself in, you can get the temporary status, get the court hearing, become a U.S. resident, eventually become a citizen, that's a lot of incentive for people not to enter the realm of illegality. So the people that are entering the realm of illegality are people who, like, a lot of them, sadly, have been cheated by the system. Like, you got people who their kids are born here, their grandkids are here, their wives are U.S. citizens, their kids are U.S. citizens, their grandkids are U.S. citizens. All their family is U.S. citizen, and they are the one person who doesn't have their papers. I recently talked to a Uber passenger. I think they were, I can't remember what state they were from, but they were Americans, and their cleaning lady, her husband was illegal. She was legal, but the husband was illegal. Might have been Colombian or Venezuelan, I can't remember. But anyways, the American actually went ahead and they've been paying lawyers, and they're like, how does this person not become a U.S. citizen? Like, I've seen a lot of cases where, like, I've seen them personally where I've tried to help people, and I've seen, like, my customer on Uber where, like, they're Americans and their cleaning lady's husband's illegal, and they're trying to make this guy legal. Wife's legal, kids are legal, and the whole family's here. And those people, even if they get deported and if they get arrested, they're going to come back to the United States because everybody they're related to is a U.S. citizen. Sometimes they might have a driving without a valid driver's license charge or something like that. But you go figure, if all your family, your wife, your kids, grandkids, you got 30 people in the United States who are U.S. citizens, and you're the only one who doesn't have that status, you're gonna remain here. I think those people deserve a better chance than the ones that are getting temporary status, but that's the way the system works. But you have people like that, and those people are never going to actually be, like, if they get deported, they're gonna come back. And their families are always gonna help those people. They're not just gonna let those people, they have nothing in whatever country they get deported. There's nothing there. Like, I know people that have been here since they were 2 or 3 years old, man. I know people who came here when they were 2, when they were 1. And it's like, okay, you can go back to the country where you were born, but you don't really know anybody there. But anyways, right now, a lot of the people who are quote unquote deportable are not illegals. The illegals are difficult. They make it purposely difficult to track these people. Among the illegals are like the ones I've mentioned where their families have legal status. You have the ones that are using a double ID. So those people, they're not detectable by law enforcement. There's just a lot of categories, which we could go on and on and on and on about, of people who are actually illegal. And in those realms of people, those are tough layers to scratch. Those are people who have engineered ways to become undetectable. Lots of different ways. You have people that have a lot of money, and they have other people that are U.S. citizens that are helping them, and it never ends. The whole realm of illegality is just, I think the only way that those people could actually, like, be caught is if there was like a citizens rewards program or something where you'd be like, okay, how much is your uncle worth? But no, most people who are going to get deported are not illegal. Actual illegally in the country, actually doesn't have a driver's license. Actually illegal? No. Residents, If you're a resident, you haven't become a citizen yet, and you get pulled over with a DUI or expired license plate, you're gone. If you commit a crime and you're a resident, you're definitely gone. If you have a temporary status, and you're vulnerable, I mean, you should just plan accordingly. If you're in that temporary status, I would just plan accordingly, live light, travel more, maybe in the United States. Like, don't, like, just know that eventually start making arrangements because it's not guaranteed. And, that's what it's about. Actual illegals getting deported, it's difficult. And a lot of U.S. citizens that look like minorities are going to have a real hard time if there's some type of civil. It's not going to happen. You're not going to do checkpoints and stuff like that. And if you start doing stuff like that, you're going to have a lot of lawsuits from a lot of people. Because people like myself who are U.S. citizens, and we've been through discrimination. Like, look at me. I've dealt with so much hate, discrimination, just even though I'm a U.S. citizen, simply because I'm not a U.S. born citizen, to where I'm reluctant. Just if I go up to a checkpoint, I might not be the nicest person. I might not be the most. I wouldn't have any interest in being cordial in that situation, because it's just, like I said, it wasn't like I was brought here as a young kid, became a U.S. citizen, renewed my residence when I was 18 years old, so I was still a minor when I renewed when I renewed my residence, I was like, I had just turned 18, like, a few months, I believe, I'm not sure on the timing, but I became a resident again. I renewed my residency. I had turned 18. I was still a minor when I renewed my residence the last time. And it wasn't because I wanted to, it was because I had to. So I turned 18 and boom, I got to come up with $1,000 for whatever it costs to become a resident again. Then I renewed my residency, became a citizen, all that process. So this is something where, like, a lot of people have been pushed into being here, didn't have a choice. If it were up to me now that I'm an adult, I'm ready to travel to Spain. I'm ready to see Spain. My grandparents were Spaniards, I believe, so I can go to Spain. Spain extends Spanish citizenship to the third generation. So all I gotta do is hop on over to Spain and become a Spanish citizen with no arms wide open. It doesn't, like, I see the struggle of people to become a U.S. citizen, and now that I'm a U.S. citizen, the only reason I want to be in the United States is because all my family's here. I don't care for being a slave in this country. Taxes, if you buy a house, you never really own it because you're getting taxed, property taxes. There's a lot of things I don't like about this country. I'm in this country because my family's all here. If it were up to me, I didn't have family, I wouldn't be here. I would look into Spain, where I can become a citizen of Spain without having any of this hate, you could call it. Arms wide open, I could just go to Spain. A lot of Haitians are staying in Mexico, too much violence there, but the United States is violent as crap too, so it's not like I haven't experienced violence in the United States. I mean, crap, I've lived in Louisville, Montgomery. It's just cities that have potentially really high homicide rates on par with places in Mexico, so it's not like violence in this country. But even a lot of Americans, like, looking to Costa Rica, Spain, Italy, like, people are looking for a place where if you own something, it's actually yours. And again, it isn't that I have a prejudice against the United States of any sort. It's, how has the United States treated me? Well, I've been profiled, discriminated. I've been called illegal. I've been called a Mexican, knowing I'm not a Mexican. So the United States has not been warm and cuddly to me. This is a country that has marginalized me in a lot of ways. So why would I care to be loyal to this country beyond the fact that I have to follow the rules? For example, like, I've never been arrested, don't plan to be arrested, don't break the law, don't consume anything illegal. I don't break the law. I pay my taxes the way you're supposed to pay your taxes. Because I have friends that are Americans born here in this country, and they pride themselves in not paying enough taxes. Well, I wouldn't do that. I pay my taxes. Pay my taxes every year the way I'm supposed to. Don't have a criminal record. Don't intend to have a criminal record. Don't break the law. Don't associate with people who break the law. So I'm a model U.S. citizen. What makes me a great U.S. citizen isn't whether if I wave a flag or if I vote or not. That's not what makes you a great citizen of a country is somebody who pays taxes and respects the law. I pay my taxes and I follow the law. I don't have a criminal record, don't want a criminal record, and that makes me a better U.S. citizen than you. If you're an American-born citizen and you don't pay your taxes every year the way you're supposed to, you're not a better citizen than me. If you're an American citizen and you consume illegal substances, you're not a better U.S. citizen than me because I'm a law-abiding citizen. See, that's a problem. A lot of people got it twisted right now. I'm a U.S. citizen just like you. You're not any more American than me. Do I need to put a flag on my car or a flag on my flag? I don't need a flag. I don't need I'm an American citizen. I don't need to do any of that crap. I don't need to vote. That doesn't make an American. What makes you a good citizen is paying taxes and obeying the law. So if you have a criminal record, you're not a better citizen than me. If you're engaging in illegal activities, you're not a better citizen than me. What makes you a good U.S. citizen is obeying the law and paying your taxes. Because a lot of people got this whole thing messed up. You got people over here who they're cheating the government, they're cheating the government's taxes, they're not following the laws. So you disobey the law, you break the law, and you think you're a better U.S. citizen than me? In what world?